Hey, how you doing, everybody? I'm the Dr. Bob Lee from 107.5 WPLS and the Make the Grade Foundation for Education. You're watching Rude Rangers TV.
Get an idea of how Rodeo FM came to be. Kind of trace us through the path here and the origin story of how the group got together and kind of how that went from start to where you are now.
Yeah, well, it's quite a long story actually. That band has been going for 16 years now in various incarnations with lots of lineup changes, and it's been pretty much my baby from the start. And the Americana scene in Germany is pretty small, so we started out as a more clear-cut country band, which in Germany always borders a bit on the what we call Schlager, so it's a bit a bit more like German folk music. Yeah. And we're trading that area when you talk about country in Germany. And alternative country wasn't really big. It's still not very big in Germany, but that's what I tried to establish. I played with a few classic country bands before that, but as I said, they sort of diverge on what would in the US be redneck territory.
Okay.
And like huge cowboy hats and saloons, and they have all these things in Germany too, but not old country is not so big. And then I found these guys who like the music, and actually I think what I really find intriguing about this, or why I pursue this sort of genre, is that it's a great genre to write songs in and to tell stories and to put a point across. Yeah. And that's really the whole point. I'm pretty open and pretty diverse when it comes to my musical tastes. I'm not even an Americana hardcore fan. I like these guys like Jason Isbell or whatever, and I even went to see him live, but it's not something I would probably put on at home. I'm more like into 60s, 70s music. That being said, it's a great genre to write songs in, and that's where I come from, and what this all revolves around.
You kind of touched on this, Pat, in terms of how you were drawn to alternative country rock and to Americana. It's about storytelling. It is about the words, and it is about the story and the lyrics. Who influenced you early when you first heard a band or a musician? You said, mm-hmm. Wow, this really resonates with me. This is good stuff. Mm-hmm. I want to write like this, and I want to make music like this. How did that come to be for you personally as a musician and as a creative artist?
Yeah, that's a winding story actually. So when I was a kid, I was really into the Beatles. And I really liked that Peter Jackson documentary, by the way. I sat through the 9 hours, and I really loved it. Let It Be, I grew up on Let It Be, actually. It was one of the very few pop records we had in the house, so I listened to that all the time. And I liked, bands like Queen and everything that was going on back then. Yep. And then in the 80s, I had a brief heavy metal phase, but then I was sort of intrigued by all these 80s punk and hardcore bands like Black Flag and Dinosaur Jr. and Husker Du and all those pre-Nirvana bands, really. And a lot of these bands were on SST, the record label. And then at one point, I was like in my late teens, I saw a poster advertising an SST band in a local club. Actually a double night, and that was Soundgarden, and and the other band was Giant Sand. So I went. I didn't know the band, they were not famous at the time. That was in '88 or '89,
Yeah.
And I went just because I saw, okay, they're on SST, and I didn't make much of Soundgarden. I didn't like them very much. I didn't like any of those grunge bands later on very much. I couldn't tell one Soundgarden song from another really. But the other band, Giant Sand, and Howie Gelb, they were playing as a two-piece. They really totally blew me away. That was like an epiphany, because they had the guy was like, Howie Gelb, he was playing a very distorted guitar, very Hendrix-like, but they were playing country songs. And
cool.
And the next day I went out and bought their first album, Valley of Rain, which is like, which also is like, they have this mix of, alternative rock, 80s, early 80s alternative rock mixed with country music, and
oh wow,
it's still one of my favorite albums, and the guy is really one of my biggest influences, both in terms of songwriting and in terms of playing guitar. I don't know, I've seen them like 20 times ever since.
Wow.
And the second moment I had was a couple years later in the early 90s, when so I still had this image in my head of country music being a bit redneck and backward and nothing too hot, because it's not unreasonable. But then someone, my brother actually, he gave me that album, Johnny Cash Plays Folsom Prison, and
oh wow,
I listened to that and I thought, wow, this is so funny and so witty and so radical in a way, and so unlike anything I would have, country music, I would have imagined to be country music to be like.
Yeah.
And I really love that. And the next year I saw Johnny Cash on his last tour, I think.
Wow.
In Germany in 93 or 94 on the American Recordings tour. And it was so great. The guy was such a natural entertainer, so very likable and witty and still very cool, and I really love that. And that's how I sort of came to country music. And then after a while, I sort of piece by piece, I discovered all these alternative bands like Sun Vault or Uncle Tupelo, and that whole soup of bands.
Yep.
And that influenced me in my songwriting quite a lot.
Well, that's very cool, and it's interesting. I'm in Olympia, Washington State. I'm just south of Seattle, the birthplace of pretty much all the grunge sound back in the day. I'm not enamored by grunge. I'm a pretty big Pearl Jam fan. I like a lot of Nirvana, but I never got into Soundgarden and Alice in Chains or a lot of those bands, really. But it's funny that you say you weren't into it. You went to a Soundgarden show to see the other band. I think that's cool.
Yeah, I never liked grunge. I love Nirvana because I think, Kurt Cobain, he was like, he was an icon. He was like Jimi Hendrix or Elvis or Sid Vicious, or like one of the very few icons of 20th century popular culture. But then after 91, I sort of lost interest when the whole grunge thing broke. I was never really into that. I saw Nirvana in 91, just a couple of weeks before Nevermind came out. And a friend of my brother, he used to work at Rough Trade in those years, which was the distribution company for all these labels in Europe. Yeah. And he brought home a tape of Nevermind because they always got these pre-release recordings.
Wow.
And we put it on a couple of weeks before the album actually came out. That was in, like June, July or so. And we thought, well, that's pretty good, It was a great album at the time. And then we went to Reading, that's close to London, to a festival. And Nirvana were like second on the bill. They played at 2:00 in the afternoon.
Wow.
And and nobody really knew them. You know, that they were. I mean, they had a small following, but they were just, you know, your average punk band actually.
Yeah.
And we were pretty close to the stage, and that totally blew me away. The guy was so charismatic, and the show was so incredible. It was really quite a moment. One of those moments.
Yeah, no, I hear you, and you described it perfectly, Pat. These are guys, musicians, souls, Johnny Cash and Kurt Cobain, whatever it is, they have it. It's hard to put your finger on it, but when you're witnessing it, and you're in the moment with that, it's pretty powerful.
Yeah,
pretty
totally.
powerful stuff.